So the next thing that we're going to be doing here is we're going to move on to the point where we tell Unreal to apply those virtual textures from the surface onto our static mesh here. So in this case, our snowbank. So we're going to click on our actor here that we're going to be using, and we're going to scroll down here. We're going to find our material, and this is a material instance once again. So we're going to double click on this material instance. If we go to our master material, we can double click on our master material here. So basically, this is our original material here, and we're going to be blending it with a new material that we're going to create here. So just to kind of keep things organized, if I go in here, select all of this stuff, and I hit C, we can create a comment and just call this. So that's just basically going to show us that that's our Megascans material that we separated here. So right click and search for blend material attributes. We're going to click on that, and basically what this is going to do is it's going to blend this Megascans material with a new material that we create, which is going to reference the landscape material and virtual texture output from that, so that we can then blend whatever this material is right here that's on our asset with this landscape material that's being outputted from the runtime virtual texture. And then we're going to use this alpha part of this node to basically tell it how much do we want to blend that together. That's going to give us some control of, like, the height of this material and how much feathering and things like that we can have, so that we can blend as we choose. So we can right click in here, and we're just going to search for runtime virtual texture, and we're going to do runtime virtual texture sample parameter. What that's going to do is that's going to allow us to choose which virtual texture sample we want to use. So we're just going to call this VT underscore height. And basically what this is this is like I was talking about before with the parent and the parent materials, the master materials, whatever you want to call it, and material instances. When you make a parameter, which is what this is a runtime virtual texture sample parameter. That means that you're going to be able to edit this parameter in any material instance that you create from this master material. So basically what this means is that when I go into my material instances in my Megascans asset, so when I'm in here, I'll have a little parameter that's going to show up down here that's going to be my virtual texture sample. And then I can choose for each individual asset which runtime virtual texture sample I want to reference. So that's just going to give us a little bit more control. Then we don't have to keep going back into this master material if we want to change it, and we'll have more modularity basically. So once again, we're going to need to get our world position, and this is the absolute world position like before. We're using this to basically specify our virtual texture height. We're going to be combining these. So we're going to drag this out, and we're going to use a component mask like before. And once again, we're going to uncheck the red and green channels, and we're going to check the blue channel. So that's going to collect our height data. Basically, this is giving us our world height. And we're going to subtract our virtual texture height from our world height. And that's basically going to, tell Unreal how high we need to be applying our virtual texture. Drag this out, and we're going to do a subtract node. We're going to take our world height from our virtual texture, and we're going to put it into our subtract node. This could work, but we do want to take into account the scale of our object, because that's going to vary, and you want Unreal to react properly based on the scaling of your object. We can kind of specify for Unreal how to react to that by searching for object bounds, and we can click enter. And once again, we're going to do a component mask, only using the Z axis or the blue channel. So now basically this is telling us the height of where we're applying our virtual texture, but we're going to add to that based on the scaling of our object. So based on the height of our object, so we're taking the object bounds, running it through this mask that's only taking the height of our object, and then we're going to add that to the result of this. So if your object is bigger, it's going to increase the height at which the virtual texture will be applied, which makes sense because your object is bigger. So what we're going to do is right click, and we're going to do an add, and we're just going to take our subtract, put it into the A slot, take our mask here and put it into the B slot. The next part is going to be adding some control in over the height of our blending. So we want to be able to tell it, we want to have this blending up higher or lower, and we want it to fade more. And the way that we're going to do that is by using a multiply node. Just search multiply. And then we need a scalar parameter. So once again, we're adding a scalar parameter, which we're going to be able to modify in our material instance over here. And that's helpful because instead of going into our master material and changing it for all the instances that reference this master material, we can just go into every individual instance and change it. So say I want the blending to be up higher on this asset, but lower on this asset. I can just go into the material instance for this asset right here, which is here, and I can modify it. And then if I go over here later on, once we apply this and I go into this material instance, I'll have a spot where I can modify that here as well. So I can change them to different amounts and whatever I feel like, and I don't have to worry about it modifying for every instance. So the way that we're going to do that is by holding S and clicking, and that's going to create a scalar parameter. And we're just going to call this parameter blend height. And for our default value, which you can set, and that's just going to be whatever the default value is when you first load it up in your material instance. So that we're just going to do 1.1 as our default value. And so we're going to take this and drag it into our multiply node. We're taking our blend height and we're controlling that down here. So we need to combine these through a subtract node because basically we're subtracting the additional blend height from our final node here. So what we need to do is type in subtract, and we're going to drag our add node into the A slot and our multiply node into the B slot. So at this point, now we can control the height of our blending, but we don't have any control over the actual fall off or the fading or feathering, whatever you want to call it, in our blending, which is important because if you have a hard line, it's not going to look any good. We're going to use a divide to do that. So right click and type in divide, and we're going to take our subtract and drag it into the A slot here. Then we're going to do another scalar parameter. So we're just going to hold S and click, left click, and we're going to call this fall off. And for this default value, we're just going to do 85, just kind of guessing here. And once again, this is a scalar parameter, so we're going to be able to modify this in our material instances. So we're going to take this and drag it into our divide. Now, before I go any further, I just want to say, this is definitely a more advanced level of using the material editor. This is kind of give you a little bit of insight into what the material editor is all about and the power of it. But, I don't expect you guys to fully understand what's going on here. It's much higher level stuff than somebody who, has been using Unreal for a couple months or a couple of weeks and honestly, depending on your learning speed, even a couple of years. So you're following along with this. You have to do this one time in your project and then it's set up. But, I do want you guys to try and follow along and understand and just try to at least pick up some pieces of what I'm doing here so that you can apply this to other materials that you create in the future. So what we need to do here with our value that we have here is we basically need to clamp it between 0 and 1. And the best way to do that is to use a saturate node. So if we right click and type in saturate, what this node does is it just clamps a value between 1 and 0. It doesn't cost you anything. So in terms of performance, it's the most performant way to do that. At this point, all of this stuff is going to go plug into the alpha just to kind of demonstrate a little bit for you. So I'm going to right click here and we're going to type in make material attributes. This is basically just a way for us to, pull in material attributes. So we're going to drag this into base color and we're going to drag this up into our material attributes output. And so basically now you can see what we're doing. So on our sphere here, you can see that we have black down here and then it fades up into white. If I were to apply this, so I'm going to save this and that means it's been applied. So basically if we go into our material instance here, now this is completely white. So if we turn these parameters on, you can see that what we're doing here is we're collecting the height data from our map. And what I'll do, I'll move this over here so you can see it better, or you can see the height affecting things. Drag this down. You can see that even over here, when I modify these values, you can see that Now this black texture, which later will be replaced by this snow texture, is coming up onto our surface, and we can change the fall off as well based on how feathered we want it to look. So as you can see, we have this control inside of our scalar parameters, right? So that's basically what this is doing. So I'm going to reset these, and you can see that it's affecting all these materials because they all have our displacement material as their master material. So what I'm going to do here is reset this, turn these off, and we're going to go back into our master material. I'm going to break this link. Going to get rid of this make material attributes, and we're going to drag that back over there. So we're just back to where we started. So basically what we're going to do now is, instead of using that black and white, what we're going to do is plug this into the alpha here for our blend material attributes, and then for our A and B things that we're going to blend, that's just going to tell us the amount that we're going to be blending it. And for our A and B inputs, we're going to use the texture that we have on our landscape and the texture that we have from our Megascans on our Megascans asset. And then we're going to blend those together by the amount specified by our alpha, which is all of this stuff. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. So to set that up, our B input here is going to be our Megascans material, which is right here. So we're inside of our default material for our Megascans. We're going to drag this material attributes into our B slot here. We're going to break this link right here by holding Alt and clicking, and that's going to get rid of that link there because we're going to drag this in eventually. And we're going to get our A input by right-clicking, and we're going to do virtual texture sample parameter, just like we did before. So once again, this is going to be a sample parameter that we can then edit in our material instance later. We're going to call this VT underscore landscape underscore mat. So virtual texture landscape material. And this is just going to basically collect our material from our landscape and then project it up onto our asset. Now what we need to do is do a make material attributes. So, we need a material attributes output, which is this, to drag into our blend material attributes node. So we're just going to hook up our base color, our specular roughness, and our normal. And before we go any further, what we want to do here is specify that in our virtual texture, what content we want. So right now it's just base color. So if we were to apply this now, it would only have the base color. It wouldn't have all of our attributes, which we set up in our original virtual texture sample that we made. So what we want to do is change this to base color, normal, roughness, and specular. So that's going to fix that. And then also we do need to go down here to our VT underscore height and just make sure that this is set to world height. So if you remember earlier when we were in our landscape material, we converted our normal from tangent space to world space. So that means that our virtual texture output here for our normal is going to be in world space. But the problem is that for our Megascans asset here, our normal map here is going to actually be in tangent space, and that's not going to blend properly with the world space. So what we need to do first before we go any further is use a get material attributes node, and that's just going to basically allow us to break apart the material attributes so that we can access them individually and isolate that normal map so that we can convert it into world space. So we're going to go down here, we're going to hit the plus element here for our array element, set this to normal, and we're going to drag out from the normal and we're going to do transform, and that's going to be a transform vector node. And so by default here we have tangent space to world space, which is what we want, so that we can combine it with this normal here, and we're going to take this material attributes and we're going to turn it into set material attributes. And what that's going to do is just basically turn this back into a material attributes output. So we're going to specify here that we want the normal once again, and then we can take this and hook it back up into our set material attributes. Now we can drag out from here as a material attributes, which is what we need for our blend material. And so now we can plug that into our B slot, which is going to be the proper blending here. So now finally we can take our landscape virtual texture and put it into our A slot, and this is almost ready to work. But before we actually finally kind of finish this off for this part, we do need to reconvert this normal map back into tangent space. because it's currently in world space from our blend here, because we needed world space to blend these two together. So what we can do is just copy these and paste them over here, and then we can hook this up into here. And instead of, for our transform vector, from tangent space to world space, we want to go from world space to tangent space. And then now we can finally hook this up to our material attributes for our output. And you can see that now we're going to be blending our original material for our Megascans asset with whatever material we're referencing here, which in this case is our landscape material, which has been captured by our virtual texture. So we can hit save. So if I get out of this now and I go into my material instance here, you can see that we have our original look here for all of our assets. But if I go down here into our parameter areas, now we have our global scalar parameters. And if I drag this out a little bit so we can see, now we have our blend height and our fall off, and we can control those. And so now if we turn up our blend height and our fall off, so you can see that we have the black like we had before, but it's blending with this Megascans material. The reason that it's black is because we're not actually referencing the virtual texture, because we set up these as parameters in our master material. So we need to turn those on and then go into, if you go into our content and then we go into our runtime VT folder, we have to drag our RVT height into this and our RVT material into this, and now you can see that we actually have this blending properly. So if we turn our blend height down, you can see that now it's blending correctly. So I'm going to reset this, and we're just going to turn this value down. And now if we move this asset around, you can see that we have the texture from the ground blending up very nicely onto the surface of our Megascans asset. And if we move around, it updates properly, and we can adjust our fall off height or blend height, and we can also adjust our fall off as we need. So we can make it very sharp, or we can just blend this up very nicely, and you can see how much more realistic this looks. And we're going to be able to do that with all of our assets by simply going in here, clicking on them, going into our material attributes, and then enabling all of these, and we can just find our RVT height and our RVT material, and then we can go in here and turn on our blend height, blend fall off, and modify those settings. So you can see this makes a huge difference in blending our assets into our landscape.